Morning, everyone. Thanks for coming so much. Great to see so many old friends in the audience. Really, really good to see you all. Thank you. I've got the daunting task of starting this with a title that I think will be familiar to many of you. Intergenerational planning is so important. And there are the learning objectives, because this is, and I always say this, it won't seem like it, a structured CPD session. So there they are. I'm not going to read them out. And I was talking to Nikki about this earlier, about our slides with loads of words on them. There's more information on these slides, and the recording of this will be available to you on Techlink very soon, won't it, James? And I'm not going to cover all of the issues that are covered on those slides, just pick out some of the really important points, in my view anyway. Right, first one, delivering alpha. Oh, not that again. But I start everything with this because it is really, really important, and it sums up what we do for our clients, to the title of this whole day, about delivering good outcomes and the value of advice. And alpha, I think, as you all know, it's been talked about a lot by many institutions, one of whom is Vanguard, who I stole this from. Really is Vanguard say very well what alpha is, and it's the ability to deliver advice that leaves your clients better off with you than without you. They quantify it and talk about 3% a year is the value of advice when done well. Won't surprise you. Okay, intergenerational alpha is just doing it for more people, for a wider client base, which must make sense, mustn't it? The contributions to alpha, I'll skip through this quite quickly. Two things: behavioral coaching, being there for your clients when you need them, helping them to be engaged with their finances, and then making smart choices, which is the sort of stuff that we're going to be talking about more today. Making smart choices, making your clients aware that choices even exist. Doing that well, as a byproduct, also helps you satisfy your consumer duty responsibilities, I think. Then, of course, you need to record them, of course, to prove that you've done it. But doing that well will do that, and will leave your clients better off and wanting to do business with you and wanting to recommend you. Doing it for a wider set of people, a wider group of people, must make sense for your business too, mustn't it? Because when you come to valuing your business for whatever purpose, maybe for an exit, for a capital event, then it must be worth more if you have a set of relationships with other than just older people, with people who are eventually going to receive whatever money is passed on to them, obviously. Next one. Right, here's some stuff you perhaps don't expect from TC, and there's some intergenerational undeniables. Some facts from the market, which hopefully will be not new to you, but will be reassuring to you, because they do give us a really great foundation for saying this is an important area of business. First one is the money flow. You'd have seen this stated in many places. This is from some research done by the Centre for Economic and Business Research, and it just says over the next 30 years there's going to be about 5.5 trillion. And it will change, of course, but that's a lot of money, whether it's 4 or 5 or 6. It's a lot of money that is flowing from largely the boomer generation to all the other generations, the millennials and the Gen X's and all the rest of it, depending on when people had kids and how old those kids are now. They're going to be receiving a lot of money, and it's absolutely important that we are part of that money transfer and having a relationship with the people who are eventually going to get it. Statement of the obvious. The Institute of Fiscal Studies, who write some interesting stuff, also did some research on this whole, how do people get money? What sort of assets do they get? And when do they get the money? And this was interesting because I think it just reassures us of a number of things. Just to pick out a couple of points that really sort of struck me on this. And one is that, unsurprisingly, more people make gifts than make loans, and seeking for some sort of little bit of guidance to give. Maybe there is an underappreciation, maybe not, but maybe there's an underappreciation of just how effective loans can be as a starting point for inheritance tax planning. Statement of the obvious. Maybe we should talk about loan trusts a little bit more as an easy way into estate planning for those who are a bit nervous, understandably, about estate planning because I don't know what I might need myself. That's pretty obvious, I think. That's one thing that is really, really important. The fact is that over half of lifetime transfers are made by the wealthiest of adults, and that last bit, and the oldest adults as well, which are your clients, that last bit there around what triggers someone to think about making a gift, maybe when they get some money themselves from an inheritance. And if that's the case, then the first question we should ask is, when did you inherit? Because there might be some scope to do that gifting more tax efficiently through a deed of variation. So it's little small reminders of things that you know well, but just little reminders that are underpinned by what's actually going on in the world. Next bit, what I want to pick out of this, over 50s are more likely to make a transfer than under 50s, pretty obviously, and looking up again, I should know this is the important point, I think. Inheritances are arriving much later in life. Why is that? Largely because people are living longer, obviously, aren't they? Apparently in 1990, there were 95,000 people in the world who were over 100. And in this year, there are over 500,000. In the FT 2 weeks ago, Martin Wolf wrote a piece which was a good reminder of the good stuff there is out there on longevity and what's going on. A couple of books written by Andrew Scott from the London Business School, not the star of Ripley and All of Us Strangers, unless he's multi-talented, might well be. But those books, the Longevity Imperative and the 100-Year Life, gives you some great reminders of just, yeah, people are generally living longer. And what does that mean? It means they need their money for longer. Kerry will be talking about this afternoon with Claire in terms of the importance of factoring that really important fact into your cash flow planning and your cash flow modelling. So it means I'm living longer. Obviously, I need more money to sustain me. I maybe need to work a bit longer, or I might even choose to work a bit longer. And the piece in the Times at the weekend was showing that the ONS survey shows that there's getting on for 1.5 million people now, and this is going up exponentially every year, in work over age 65. ONS survey also shows, if you're age 60, as a man, you've got average 25 years of longevity of life left, and a woman sort of 27 years. And the older you get, the sort of further you push it on. It's happening, you know it's happening, need to factor it into our planning, pretty obviously. And then people are going to inherit later, to that point on the slide. And if you're relying on your mum and dad's stash, as it were, to sustain you in retirement, and I don't need a pension, then maybe think again because about when you're going to need that money and how long you're going to keep on working until you keep on working to generate income in before you get that money, because generally speaking, they're living longer. And generally speaking, lots of generally speaking here, wealthier people are more likely to have a longer lifespan than people who aren't so wealthy because they can look after themselves a bit better, afford better food, and go to the gym, I suppose. Last bit here, property. The point here, this is something that will resonate, I'm sure, with many of you. Property accounts for the majority of wealth of most people. In which case, what does that mean in terms of intergenerational planning? Well, property is a really important asset, but it's pretty illiquid, and largely the owners of that property, when it's your main residence, need to live in it. So it makes planning with it, if you're thinking of that's the asset I need to do some planning with, a bit more difficult. There's a whole load of really good stuff on Techlink on planning with your main residence. Shameless advertisement there. It is relatively complex, but there is some stuff that you can do. And also the thought around if interest rates were different, maybe releasing cash from your property to enable the gift to be made. Stress when interest rates are a little bit more favourable. That can work out on the numbers, and we cover that in Techlink too. The equity release to make gifts or to invest in investments that qualify for inheritance tax relief, business relief investments, when it might be something that you want to do, even though you have to think very carefully about the anti-avoidance provision. Basically, planning with the money that you release from your property when it's commercially acceptable to do so is something worth considering. This is something that is interesting. Progeny did some research, so give them full cred for this. It was a little while ago, but some of those statements there, I think you might go, yeah, I see that. The difficulty of having conversations. Eddie makes this point really well. In a lot of cases and in a lot of contexts, it always starts with a conversation. And most things do, because if you don't talk about it, nothing gets done. Sorry for my, I'm not rustling anything. So having the conversations is something that people have said anecdotally to me is the biggest challenge to getting intergenerational planning done, as it were. How do I, as a client, how do I have that conversation with my mum and dad upwards, as it were, without seeming self-serving? How do you have the conversations downwards with your children if you don't want to know how much they've got, how much you've got. You're happy to say, you'll get everything in the will, but I don't want to say how much you've got because it might make you less inclined to work, or I just don't want to share. And you'll know from this that all families are different, but I think we really, really have a role to play as the facilitator of that discussion. I think it's really, really important. We have the permission, as it were, to do that because we're expected to. That's what we talk about finance. So we could maybe remove the awkwardness. I think we also need to be very intentional about what we're doing in our businesses, forgive the patronizing tone, about facilitating these conversations and enabling younger generations to naturally come towards us as the place for financial advice. Just because their parents are, you're their advisor to their parents doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be the advisor to them. And then if you lose that money, access over to it, influence over it, that's an awful lot of money to lose, 5.5 trillion influence over. We did some research last year with our research partners, Ad Lucem, and on into, this is the last bit on this background stuff. We discovered, unsurprisingly, that 96% of advisors said intergenerational planning is important or very important. We then discovered with the same question with clients, it's slightly less. 66% of clients said it's important. So maybe it's still a high proportion, around 70 versus 90 odd percent, but maybe there's a gap there that we can close by having the conversations with our clients. Then we looked at this bit. 90% of advisors said, yeah, it's important, and we advertised the fact that we do intergenerational planning, but far fewer of the advisors we talked to actually had a plan, and actually had the conversations with the next generation, or even, maybe worse, the spouse or partner. Oh, that's nice. The spouse or, no, you say, turn it up, I'd rather hear that than him. The spouse or partner of your main client. And having those conversations is so, so important. Right, the challenges and prizes, don't want to dwell too much on that. The challenges and prizes are pretty simple. To not have the conversations means potentially losing influence over that money. To have the conversations and have the relationship means retaining influence over that money. Makes sense, doesn't it? And building the value in your business that having those relationships enables you to have. It does all of those good things too. And to do that, to have that relationship with a wider group of clients gives you the opportunity to deliver alpha to more people. How do you do that? You do that through knowing the world in which you're living in, knowing the context in which you give financial advice, but also knowing very specifically about your clients and what's important to them and where they want to be in X years' time, and knowing specifically about the solutions that are available to you to help them achieve their objectives. So those two things, contextual knowledge and specific know-how, the real doability, knowing what's important to your client and what things specifically help them to achieve their objectives. So the contextual bit first, and that is the last fiscal event we had this year was the spring budget. I'm not going to dwell on this hugely, and we'll probably have the next one this year at some point. Question is when. Whoever's in government apparently needs to give 10 weeks to the Office of Budget Responsibility to do the economic and fiscal outlook forecast on which they base their budget. 10 weeks needed to be given. When we have the election, the earliest we can have one effectively is sometime in September, mid-September. Some may expect we have something then, but more likely to coincide with the 3-year spending review, so more likely to be October. Famous last words probably, but so sometime later in the year, the next fiscal event. But we had one already, and this is the world that we're working in. I don't want to dwell too much on all this, but what we do know is the economic circumstances behind the budget meant there was very little room for manoeuvre, and that will probably continue to be the case if the two main parties, one of whom will get in, if we leave Nigel out of it for the moment, one of those will get in, and they are both anchored very firmly to that fiscal rule of saying we need to have government proven that government debt based on forecast will be falling as a proportion of GDP in the 5th year of the forecasting period. So it's a rolling target, because every year you do the new forecast and you need to prove government debt's falling as a proportion of GDP to see if there's any money left to spend in addition to what you've already told the OBR that you're going to be spending. And the last budget enabled the government to say, based on those forecasting, and it is just forecasting, so it is prone to a bit of gaming, effectively, there's 9 billion. And that 9 billion was spent broadly to do this. Let's encourage employment and let's encourage growth. And they did that, didn't they? On the money out, we said we're going to reduce national insurance and we're going to help on the child benefit anomaly. We've started that help with the interim solution and we'll move towards a better one. And we'll move the VAT threshold up. Money in, now we're going to get some money in. Right, we'll change the furnished holiday lettings rules. Basically, they're going to be taxed just like any old trade, so you're not going to be having pensionable earnings from these, you're not going to use capital allowances, you're not going to have business assets disposal relief. None of that's going to be going on at all. You're not going to have full deductibility for interest, none of that. So we'll get some money there, and we'll also get some money from the non-dom rules. So stealing the Labour government's idea, or the Labour government, oh, he's already projecting a Labour government win. Although you look at the polls and anyway, so we'll steal their idea and we'll introduce our own provisions. And these are covered in a lot of detail in Techlink. Conscious of the time, I'm not going to dwell on these, but basically, a radical change. So we need to sharpen up our knowledge on the statutory residence test, because that's going to be the most important thing. Domicile doesn't go out the window as a legal concept, but it goes out of the window as a determinant of taxation, both income tax for people who are coming to the UK and living in the UK as originally non-residents but coming to live here. How will my income be taxed? How will my capital gains be taxed? How will my wealth be taxed when I pass it on? Because it used to be, oh, well, let's find out what your domicile is, and it will be from 2025. And bear in mind, this legislation won't be in place until after the election. So the Labour government, who have said we're going to tweak this and make it a little bit tougher, will have the opportunity to do that. Because the legislation was definitely not in the finance bill, this finance bill. It won't be in the sweep-up provisions, absolutely not, which will be within the next 4 weeks. So it's not going to be in place till the next government's there. So there could be some change to this. In principle, the general guts of it probably not going to be changed, but there could be some tweaking, particularly according to what Rachel Reeves has said, the transitional provisions, that sort of little period that says the change here is that when you are non-domiciled in the UK, you can have even if you're resident here, you can have the remittance basis, which means you only pay tax on your income and gains that you bring into the UK, and you get that sort of free for 7 years, and then you have to pay a charge for it, 30 and 60,000, depending on how long you've been here. And after 15 years, you're deemed domiciled anyway, and then you get caught. So you've got a 15-year period, and for the last half of it, you have to pay for the privilege of having non-dom status and remittance. So that's going to go out the window, and you get effectively 4 years free, whether you bring the income in or not. So you can bring it in anyway as a new resident. Lots of definitional stuff there if you haven't been resident here for the last 10 years. And I said I wasn't going to do any detail. I find it very, very interesting. So that a lot of change going on here. The way it stands at the moment, based on what we've read, and this isn't legislation, so you can't plan with certainty on it. You go, actually, there might be a continuing role for an offshore bond or an international bond as a deferment vehicle, because it doesn't produce income, doesn't produce capital gains. And if you're going to be here for a while, but then you're going to leave and don't want to be taxed on your worldwide income or your gains, might be a way of doing that and then cashing in the bond somewhere else. Although, do beware, as our international guide on Techlink will prove, there are very few jurisdictions around the world that allow you legitimately to cash in your bond without a tax liability. Okay. There's also work going to be done on inheritance tax. There's a consultation on that. Domicile out of the window. They're a fundamental principle of liability for inheritance tax, domicile. So that going too. Same old residence test. But this time, it looks like, according to what was proposed, a 10-year period before you assume sort of deemed residence for inheritance tax. So your worldwide assets get bought into the net after you've been here for 10 years. But also there's a 10-year hangover period where you are treated as being liable for inheritance tax on your worldwide assets for 10 years after you've left as well. All that up for debate. They did say, strangely, I think, that anyone that establishes an excluded property trust, before the new legislation comes in, 2025, that excluded property trust will continue to operate, provided it was set up when you were non-dom, now, up till 2025, and it continues to hold foreign assets, they will continue to be free of inheritance tax, even though you can benefit. So that's talk about a sell-by date, that is, except that, can you sell with confidence? Because Labour said, yeah, we're not having that. That's not going to happen. So what will happen? It's very, very difficult, and there's no easy answer to it. So that's where we are at the moment. But as I said, a lot more on Techlink if you want the detail, and we will be keeping up to date with this as we always do. Well, we are working, we can't forget this, in a frozen world. We're in a bit of a tundra. The government introduced, I've mentioned this before, but effectively they deployed what is in effect a boiling frog strategy. They deployed it and imposed it upon us. You know that urban myth of if you put a frog in a tepid pan of water and then gradually turn it up, you still get the same horrible consequence, the frog dies, but they don't really notice it until it's too late. And it's that sort of thing with, whereas if you chucked them in the boiling water, they go, try and get out. Sort of. I don't know if they'd make that exact noise, but and don't try this at home, of course. Please don't. He said it would be all right. Give it a try. Apparently, scientists have tested it, and it actually doesn't work because the frog does try to get out quite quickly when the water gets a bit hotter. Anyway, it's that thing. We introduced a bit of legislation that says we're not going to improve the thresholds for a while until 2026, but it's now moved to 2028 following the 22 budget. Are just going to stay the same. Thresholds, the allowances, the exemptions, and then we'll go, that's all right. It's not bad, really. It's not too bad. Tepid water. And then over time, you realise, wow, this is really having an effect. It is causing a lot more tax to be generated, especially because we've got inflation and all the rest of it that goes with it, and frozen thresholds and allowances and exemptions and reduced exemptions and allowances. Then you go, not surprising, really, that, definitely not going to dwell on this, more people are paying tax, more people are paying a higher rates tax, there are more additional rate taxpayers, more people are paying capital gains tax, more people are paying tax on their dividends, which is also having an impact on tax administration, more people having to fill in tax returns or tell HMRC about their capital gains that now exceed the annual exemption, or about their dividends that now exceed the dividend allowance, all that faff of having to do that as well as generating all that extra tax and actually having to pay it. For advisors, though, that is quite good news because the deeper the pain, the more likely people are to go to get relief from it, effectively, from fiscal pain. And it's the same for inheritance tax, where we've had a longer frozen period. Look at what the nil rate band should be if it had been CPI'd as it should have been. By 27-28, when it is due to be looked at, and by the way, the Labour government are absolutely, if Labour government, twice I've said that now, Labour are not going to change this. Any of those reasons, they're absolutely not going to go. Tell you what, we get rid of all those, we're going to raise all of the allowances and thresholds, because it's generating £37 billion of tax at the moment, and it wasn't their fault, basically. So I don't see any change happening there. So those thresholds should be a lot higher, but they aren't. Same story, more people subject to inheritance tax. We know that the number of estates that are subject to inheritance tax are still relatively small, but as a proportion of the overall population, as a proportion of your client population, that will be much, much more, many, many more than 7%. There's more than 7% of your clients who are worried or concerned about inheritance tax, I would bet. Last bit, post-election tax world. What have we heard? Let's deal with facts first of all, so let's just go with what they said here. Recent statements, Conservative haven't said that much, although they're both releasing, it seems, their manifestos in instalments. The Conservatives said, look, we aspire to be a tax-reducing government if elected, and we've proven that with reducing down national insurance and all of that, and we want to do more when it's fiscally responsible to do so. And we'd also protect pensioners, obviously going for that vote with the triple lot plus. Well, Claire might talk a bit about that in a minute. And then we've got Labour saying, look, constantly reassuring us, saying we've gone through all of our plans, all of our spending plans, and the IFS say to both parties, they should be more honest, because with the spending plans people have, if they're not going to increase taxes, where are they going to get the money from with the growth projections and the interest payments that are just still there on government debt? Be honest, no one is being. But basically, they've said, we've done all that and we don't see any need, and some very definite statements, definite need for tax increases. We don't see any need for it. And have said specifically in interviews, Rachel Reeves has said, I'm not going to be taxing capital gains as income. I'm not going to be introducing a wealth tax, a subject that gets brought up every now and again, especially if you said, you're not going to increase tax. How about introducing a new tax? And it's funny that when they do the surveys on wealth tax, everyone is in support of it as long as it doesn't affect me. Effectively is the underpin to all of that support for wealth tax. I don't think we can get away from that. The Wealth Tax Commission, by the way, remember in 2022, they had that report which suggested everyone should pay, if everyone paid 5% on everything over 500,000, everything, including property, including pensions, then we could pay back all the COVID debt and generate over 250 billion. What about that as an idea? One-off payment. It was the Wealth Tax Commission, it wasn't the government. Just, there's a lot of ideas that are out there. So no tax increases, say the Labour Party, and none, say the Conservative Party. Right. Inheritance tax, what sort of change might we see there? Because we are talking about intergen. There's been a lot of ideas put forward, but nothing specifically. And I honestly don't see this as being a #1 agenda item of stuff to do when elected. It really is, there's much more important, more pressing stuff to do. I honestly think that. I won't say it will never be reviewed or shouldn't be reviewed, but I don't see any immediate change. And certainly pre-election, I think we'd have heard a bit about that. There was a little flurry, wasn't there, a little bit earlier in the year, last year, around potential for abolition. The optics look terrible, I think, for abolishing IHT to win votes, because I think the people that would vote for that are probably already going to vote for Conservatives anyway. So the optics just don't look great. You know, why would you spend 7 billion to benefit 1% of the country? So abolition, don't see that. Certainly not in the near future. Plenty of ideas, and here are some of them. The IFS came up with some amazing stuff here. Abolish capping business relief. Abolish or cap business, sorry, Karen. Abolish or cap business relief at 500,000. Pension pot subject to IHT. Sorry, Claire. Apologies to everyone. Income tax on interest on inherited pensions, regardless of the deceased age. So they've really gone for it here. And levy and CGT at the point of death. You can do all of that. Say the IFS. This is not the government. I'm just saying there are loads of ideas. Donee-based tax, that's all been put forward as well. Right, moving on to this. This is an underpin, which I think is reassuring to all of you as advisors, is that regularly, every 2 years, the YouGov do a survey, and IHT always polls as the most hated tax, or the most disliked tax, I should say. Not quite that. Right, a few strategies to finish off with. Intergenerational planning, very easy stuff. This is not stuff that you will say is revolutionary. I've never heard that before. Look, to achieve great intergenerational outcomes, i.e. leave the family better off with your advice than without it, requires attention to detail throughout the, I hate this word, but I'm going to use it, financial planning journey, accumulation, decumulation, and the last bit, wealth transfer. Concentration is obviously on the wealth transfer bit, but if you have more money to transfer on, then that must lead to a better outcome. So making smart decisions, back to the alpha point, throughout the journey, is really, really important. So doing it at the savings point, the accumulation point, really important. Why has that become even more important? Simply because, as those other slides hopefully proved, more people are paying tax. And if you don't do some planning, then more of your money will leak away through taxation than needs to. Advice is absolutely necessary, and it's not easy. So those combinations, more people affected, and it's not easy, leads to advice. You know, you can't it's really hard, even with the greatest AI at the moment, to disintermediate this bit of the planning process, especially the reduction of the dividend allowance, especially the reduction of the CGT exemption. It does mean that, yeah, you can still get some tax freedom without thinking about wrappers, but it's much, much lower than it was only a couple of years ago. Okay, so wrappers, really important. Pension, ISA, business relief investments, all of that stuff, that VCT, EIS, all the stuff that protects you, fantastic, do them. How about when you get beyond that, there has been a resurgence of interest in investment bonds. Let's just go on from this. All the slides are here. Why is that? Just because of that. No rules have changed at all. The rules on taxing bonds, as you know, haven't changed. More people are getting more interested in it. Why is that? Because more people are paying tax outside of the wrappers, quite simply. And they either don't like paying the tax or need to be made aware that they don't need to be made aware that they don't like it, they know that, but that there is something they can do about it, and to remove the tax administration that naturally goes with having income and gains above the thresholds, above the exemptions. So bonds, for all the same reasons that they always were, are definitely worth considering. And whether it's onshore or offshore depends on the client's circumstances. Okay, why did we ever get to this point of not talking about bonds as much? I think there are some other reasons. The CGT changes were a big one. the resulting impact on advice guidance or compliance or whatever you want to call it with those prescriptive rules sometimes made it hard to recommend a bond and get it through, basically. So that should be changing now. And the recognition, even though you've got platforms, you can still do bonds on platforms, which increasingly now is much easier than it was in the past, where it was kind of off-platform in the white space. Definitely not the case now. Where are the thresholds? We all like rules of thumb. They've fallen quite a lot. If you want tax-free dividends, the amount of portfolio you can have that generates that tax-free dividend, dependent on the yield, of course, has fallen dramatically, as you'd expect, 50%, 50%, because the allowance has fallen by 50% and 50%, and the same for capital gains. This is my favorite slide of all time. It's in Techlink, but basically this says it's not quite as simple as that. It depends on what the underlying portfolio is made up of. To the extent you've got capital gains in there, it still looks quite attractive in an unwrapped investment in the collectives. But to the extent you've got reinvested dividends and interest, the tax deferment the bond gives you is fantastic. So it all depends, and you need to do your work. It's where advice and smart choice making is absolutely critical. More on that within Techlink. What we can rely on, and at least at the moment, and we have been able to rely on it for ages, is those two provisions, top slicing relief and 5% withdrawals. Been with us for ages. That long they've been with us for. It doesn't mean they'll be with us for ages in the future, but it shows HMRC see this as pretty benign and simple, and it works, and it still works as a means of deferring your liability to a time when you can manage your tax position better to use those allowances, especially top slicing, dividing the gain by the number of years. Right, some more here. Decumulation, obviously, Claire will talk about this, I'm sure, but decumulation, probably the last place to take your money from, if you've got choice, and many of your clients will have it, is your pension. It's the most tax-efficient vehicle. Decumulation rule of thumb 101 is leave your money in the most tax-efficient place, and that's the pension, generally speaking. Choose other places to take your money from where it isn't IHT-free, where it doesn't accumulate free of CGT and income tax. Talking about my generation, last time, this is the transfer on bit. Let's not forget there are many ways to minimize the inheritance tax on passing on, quite simply, obviously. And it's all stuff that you know and love, and it's all with us, unchallenged. A range of solutions, trust, bond planning, business relief investments, often a combination of the two or three or four things can do the job. We know there's the challenge. The challenge is definitely with inheritance tax planning is the gift with reservation provisions. To do something that allows people to retain access to their money and control over it, but still get it out of their estate. And those solutions that have been with us forever really remain with us, and a combination is often the answer. We don't ever really have a DOTAS, disclosure of tax avoidance scheme, issue, nor do we have trust registration scheme issues, except where we have a trust, and that's not really an issue because it's relatively straightforward, and if you need any help, plenty of stuff on that in Techlink. And let's not forget, to close, protection, because we often do forget it. I think we should have this embedded in, perhaps as the foundation stone of all intergenerational planning, the way to create a legacy for the next generation if you don't think they're going to get enough from your wealth because you've lived longer and you've diminished it quite a lot. Quite useful if you have an insurance policy in your back pocket to allow you to spend more freely, knowing you haven't diminished their inheritance. Really important. Or to pay the inheritance tax to keep the estate intact. Really, it has such an important role, probably the most important role in intergenerational planning, is to make sure that your family has enough money to live on and have the life they want when you die. And beyond that, to make them multimillionaires, if you like. Have a life insurance policy. It works so, so well. Let's remind ourselves how simple it is.